Picture this. London, 1888. A woman's scream cuts through the fog-choked streets of Whitechapel. By morning, her body will be found in a courtyard, mutilated beyond recognition. But here's what keeps me up at night. This wasn't the first. And over the next 10 weeks, 4 more women would die in ways that would change criminal investigation forever. The killer was never caught. The autumn of 1888 in London's East End wasn't just poor. It was a vision of hell. Can you imagine living in a place where entire families crammed into single rooms? Where the stench of human waste mixed with the smoke from 1,000 coal fires, over 30,000 people packed into Whitechapel's decaying tenements. Unemployment sat at 70%. Women had 3 choices: starve, work in sweatshops for pennies, or sell their bodies on the streets. And on these streets, lit only by sputtering gas lamps, walked the women history would call the canonical 5-dot Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. Ages ranging from 25 to 45, all struggling with alcoholism, all forced into prostitution to afford a bed for the night. Where poverty was crushing, violence was commonplace. Where hope had died, women disappeared regularly. But what was about to happen would grip the world's attention for over a century, because this killer was different. August 31st, 1888, 3:45 a.m. A cart driver named Charles Cross walks down Bucks Row on his way to work. Something dark lies crumpled against a stable entrance dot at first. He thinks it's a tarpaulin. It's not. Mary Ann Nichols, 43 years old, lies on her back. Her throat has been cut so deeply it nearly decapitated her. But the killer didn't stop there. Her abdomen had been slashed open. The police surgeon, Dr. Llewellyn, examined the body at the scene. His conclusion? The cuts were made with a long-bladed knife, wielded by someone with anatomical knowledge. This wasn't a drunken brawl gone wrong. 8 days later, Annie Chapman leaves a lodging house at 2 a.m. because she doesn't have the 4 pennies for a bed. Don't worry, she tells the deputy, I'll be back soon. She never returns. At 6 a.m., a resident of 29 Hanbury Street goes into the backyard. Annie Chapman's body lies between the steps and the fence. The mutilations this time are worse. Far worse. Her throat cut, abdomen opened, internal organs removed with surgical precision. The killer had taken her uterus. Now London panics. Where the first murder seemed random, this one showed planning, skill, purpose. The press goes into a frenzy. Papers publish graphic details. They give the killer a name that will echo through history, Jack the Ripper. And then the letters arrive, hundreds of them sent to newspapers and police. Most are obvious hoaxes, but 3 stand out. The Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jackie postcard, and the From Hell letter, which arrived with half a human kidney. Mr. Lusk. It reads, I send you half the kidney I took from one woman. The other piece I fried and ate it. It was very nice. Medical analysis suggested it was indeed half a human kidney, preserved with spirits. It could have come from Catherine Eddowes, murdered 2 weeks earlier. Can you imagine being a woman in Whitechapel that autumn? Every shadow held death. Every footstep behind you could be your last. And the killer was just getting started. September 30th becomes known as the double event. 2 women. 2 murders. Less than an hour apart. Elizabeth Stride, at 1 a.m. in Dutefield's yard. Catherine Eddowes at 1:45 in Mitre Square. The killer walked less than a mile between victims while the city slept. Where Elizabeth Stride's murder was interrupted. Her throat cut but no abdominal mutilation. Catherine Eddowes received the full horror. Her face was slashed. Her intestines pulled out and draped over her shoulder. Part of her kidney and her entire uterus were taken. The police had nothing. No forensic science. No fingerprinting. No DNA. Just witness descriptions that contradicted each other. And a growing pile of bodies. To understand why Jack the Ripper was never caught, you need to understand Victorian London. This wasn't CSI. This was a police force equipped with whistles and wooden clubs. Facing a killer who understood anatomy better than most doctors, the investigation fell to Detective Inspector Frederick Aberline. Where other officers saw prostitutes nobody cared about, Aberline saw human beings who deserved justice. He interviewed over 2,000 people, investigated over 300 suspects, and got nowhere. The suspects list reads like a dark carnival. 76 men were seriously investigated, but 5 names dominate theories to this day. Montague John Druitt, a barrister and teacher whose body was pulled from the Thames in December 1888, weeks after the final murder. His family believed he was sexually insane. Police found his chambers filled with women's clothing. But he was teaching cricket in another town during at least one of the murders. Aaron Kosminski, a Polish Jewish immigrant living in Whitechapel, declared insane in 1891, admitted to an asylum where he died in 1919. A witness reportedly identified him, but refused to testify because Kosminski was Jewish. Modern DNA analysis of a shawl supposedly from one crime scene points to him. But that evidence is wildly disputed. Severin Klosowski, who called himself George Chapman, a Polish barber surgeon who lived in Whitechapel during the murders, then moved to America when they stopped. He returned to England and poisoned 3 wives. Inspector Aberline himself said, "You've got Jack the Ripper at last." Francis Tumblety, an American doctor with no medical degree who collected uteruses in glass jars. He was in London during the murders. He was arrested for gross indecency in November 1888, posted bail, and fled to America. The murders stopped and perhaps the most famous theory, Prince Albert Victor, Queen Victoria's grandson. This one's almost certainly false. It was popularized by a BBC documentary in the 1970s, claiming the murders were part of a royal cover-up involving Freemasons. Where the evidence is thin, the storytelling is thick. But let me tell you about the murder that changed everything. The one that shows you exactly who Jack the Ripper was. November 9, 1888. Mary Jane Kelly, 25 years old, lies in her room at 13 Miller's Court. She's the youngest victim. Unlike the others, she has an indoor room, not just a street corner. At 10:45 a.m., the landlord's assistant knocks on her door. Rent is overdue. No answer. He looks through the broken window pane. What he saw haunted him for the rest of his life. I won't describe the full horror. Some things shouldn't be detailed. But the police photographs show a woman who was mutilated for hours. Where the other victims were killed in minutes on dark streets, Mary Kelly's killer had time. Privacy. He took his time. The room was locked from the inside. Her clothes were folded neatly on a chair. The fire burned so hot in the grate that it melted the spout off a kettle. The killer had burned something. Possibly his blood-stained clothing. The police surgeon's report noted the killer possessed considerable anatomical skill and knowledge. This wasn't rage. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And then, nothing. Jack the Ripper vanished. No more murders with his signature. No more letters. After Mary Kelly, the canonical 5 were complete, and the killer disappeared into history. Can you imagine how that feels? The sudden silence after such horror. The police, the press, the public, all waiting for the next attack that never came. So where did he go? Maybe he died. Druitt's body in the Thames suggests suicide. Maybe he was institutionalized. Kosminski spent decades in asylums. Maybe he emigrated. Tumblety fled to America, and the murders stopped. Or maybe, and this keeps me up at night, maybe he was just better at hiding it. Serial killers don't usually stop. They evolve. They get better. In America, unsolved murders with similar patterns appeared in the 1890s. In Central America. In South Africa. Were these copycat killers inspired by the press coverage? Or was Jack the Ripper an international traveler? Modern forensic analysis hasn't solved it. That shawl I mentioned, supposedly from Catherine Eddowes, was tested in 2014. DNA analysis pointed to Kosminski, but the shawl's chain of custody is questionable. It was never logged as evidence. It passed through private hands for a century. What we do know is this: 5 women died horrifically. They weren't just victims. They were people. Mary Ann Nichols had 5 children. Annie Chapman was a talented crocheter who fell on hard times. Elizabeth Stride was Swedish, murdered the day she planned to move out of Whitechapel. Catherine Eddowes used the alias Mary Ann Kelly to protect her family from shame. Mary Jane Kelly was a beautiful young woman who'd worked in a high-class brothel in France before poverty trapped her in London. Every time we say Jack the Ripper, we give power to the killer. Maybe it's time we remembered the women instead. Their names deserve to be known. Their stories deserve to be told. Not as footnotes in the legend of a murderer, but as human beings who lived in impossible circumstances and died in unimaginable ways. So who was Jack the Ripper? After 137 years, we still don't know. Was it Kosminski, the insane Polish immigrant? Tumblety, the fake doctor who collected organs? Chapman, the barber surgeon who went on to poison his wives? Maybe it was someone never suspected at all. Maybe it was a woman. Several theorists suggest a midwife with surgical knowledge. Maybe it was a team working together. Or maybe the simplest answer is correct. A man with medical knowledge who either died, was institutionalized, or left the country. Here's what haunts me about this case. Where we remember Jack the Ripper, we forget what his murders revealed about Victorian London. These women died because society failed them. They weren't killed in dark alleys by accident. They were there because every door in polite society had been closed to them. Can you imagine having no options? Being so desperate that you'd walk dark streets alone at night, despite knowing a killer was hunting? That's not recklessness. That's survival with no alternatives. And before we get too comfortable thinking this is ancient history, remember, women still face violence. Women still disappear. Women are still murdered at alarming rates. The names change. The cities change. But the story continues. Jack the Ripper fascinates us because he was never caught. But maybe the real horror isn't the mystery. It's how little has changed. Where we obsess over the killer's identity, we miss the larger point. Society created the conditions that made these women vulnerable. And society let their killer walk free. So here's how I want you to remember this story. Not as the legend of Jack the Ripper, the mysterious killer who vanished into fog, but as the tragedy of Mary Ann, Annie, Elizabeth, Catherine, and Mary Jane. 5 women who deserved better. 5 women who got headlines instead of justice. Their killer was never caught, but their stories won't be forgotten. Not as long as we keep telling them.